Now, with the housekeeping done, it's a pleasure to introduce our first panel of the day, Evolving Capabilities to Future-Proof the Enterprise, Fostering the Ability to Perform in a State of Constant Disruption. And for that, I'd like to welcome Will Leahy, Director of Learning and Talent at GoDaddy, who's going to be our moderator, and our two distinguished panelists, Vinay Sharma, former Chief Learning Officer at a large call center provider, and Karla Vasquez, Global Head of Learning Technology Ecosystems with Caterpillar. Thank you again for joining us, Will, Vinay, and Carlos, and welcome to our virtual stage.
Great. Thank you so much, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a CLO junkie. I'm a regular, so I'm sure I've seen or met quite a few of you. I was originally going to present, but I started my new role at GoDaddy just 5 weeks ago. So I thought, you know what, better to keep me as a moderator, which I'm very excited to do and love to do. And I have two wonderful people with me today, Carlos and Vinay. And please, if you have questions in the chat box, I want to make this as interactive as possible. We have some polls and things we'll have you vote on as well, just to get real-time insights we can try and drive into the conversation. The topic has been about disruption, and it has been for months, yet we've seen unprecedented levels of it. So good foresight in choosing the topic. And we really want to have a conversation on how that's changed us as human beings, how it's changed the work that we do, and how it's changed how we're empowering organizations to be better. And so without further ado, the way I want to start this is just giving Carlos and Vinay, both of you, a little bit of time just to introduce yourself and talk about your role. And then prepare yourself. I'm going to hit you with a couple of questions, and I will answer a few of them myself if I decide to jump in. And again, feel free to dig into the chat box. So, Carlos, we'll start with you. Why don't you just give us a quick introduction, what you do, and then we'll give it over to you as well, Vinay.
Sure. Thank you, Will. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening for some of you. First of all, thank you for having me today. As you indicated, my name is Karla Vasquez. I'm originally from Mexico City. I have been living in the United States for almost 15 years. I came to a short-term assignment with Abbott Laboratories for 3 years. We extended to 5 years. We came with a L1 visa, then a green card. Now we are U.S. citizens. So it has been an interesting short-term assignment, but very, very, very grateful to live in this country. My career most of the time has been in pharmaceutical. I have been working for Caterpillar the last 8 months. I'm responsible for the implementation of the learning ecosystem. One of the biggest technologies that we're implementing as we speak is Workday learning. All the HR organization is moving to Workday, so we are not the exception. So we used to work with Saba, or we're still having Saba in place. That is our learning management system. But we are getting ready, the organization, to move to a new technology. So that's my biggest responsibility. First of all, the implementation of Workday learning, and of course, building the learning ecosystem moving forward.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm sure if anyone has Workday questions, you might be the best person to reach out to. So that's, you've outed yourself there. Vinay, how about you?
Sure. So hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening. This is Vinay. I'm right now based in Manila. So hello from Manila. It's 2 a.m., but I couldn't be more excited and lively, interacting with this fantastic audience. So I've been in the offshoring business outsourcing industry for almost 2 decades. Worked with companies like GE, Capital, JP Morgan Chase, had a long tenure with them for 10 years. And, very recently with Alorica, a large outsourcing company. Excited to be here to be part of this panel, and looking forward to the session today.
Great. Okay, so we're going to jump into some questions. And again, the topic really here is how do we help teams perform in a state of constant change? No doubt about it. We are experiencing unprecedented levels of that. I can speak for GoDaddy. In 72 hours, we brought 8,000 employees home. And that created a whole new level and way of working, and a lot of training and development was associated with that. So Vinay, I'll keep it over with you. How has the working remotely and working from home impacted your business and your scope of work?
Well, I think the last few months have dramatically changed the landscape of how we would approach the learning function. Learning typically is extremely successful if you have the opportunity to plan, to really understand your audience, build the content, and then deploy it successfully using, all the technology, all the enablers available to you as an organization. But the last few months have really changed the dynamics. As a team, we have learned that we need to focus on being more agile and to know that disruption is the new normal. So adapting and turning around things for a large workforce in a very, very short period of time has been the key focus area. Partnering with the business to make sure we're still delivering to our clients' expectation has been the phenomenal shift that we have seen in how we are approaching things of late.
Great, and I'm gonna actually pass the same question over to you, Carlos, in terms of how this has impacted your business and your scope of work.
Sure. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start first of all talking about myself, right? As a human being, as an employee. So my life and my work has been impacted dramatically. I think each of us, it's happening exactly the same as what I'm experiencing. That's the first thing that I need to recognize, that my role changed. So by default, the people that I work with, it changed too. The people that I work with, my team, my peers, my leaders. So there's a huge disruption out there. So that's the first thing that I would like to highlight. Ironically, all this big situation is playing in my favor from the work standpoint, right? Remember that I'm responsible for implementing the learning ecosystem. We have at Caterpillar a pretty old system that is Java that we didn't update it for a long time. So we are really looking forward for a new technology. So ironically, this situation is helping us to move faster, right? In the past, nobody would have used the SATA system because it's very challenging, right? Now we need to use the system because people are working remotely. Now we need to provide a lot of content because they need it at the time that they need it. So I needed to, first of all, work with my team to be sure that the actual system is going to work properly for the actual situation. And secondly, in parallel, working with a new technology. So there's two factors here. The first one is how we can support the business disruption that is happening today and happened a couple of months ago, and what we can learn from that. So we have a lot of lessons learned about that piece. And the second piece is how we can bring all the best of these experiences from the human perspective, personal perspective, and company's perspective to the new way of working and a new way of living with the new technology that we are bringing in 2021. So kind of long story short is this situation is helping us to go faster. It's helping us to make some investments and to realize how people is learning right now, that we are recognizing as an organization that we don't need to have ILTs all the time, right? That people learn by themselves. We don't need to have a lot of push. We need to provide the information that they needed when they need it. And that's what technology is going to help us, and it's helping us right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you talked a little bit about some carrying through some of the lessons learned from this into the future. And I'll just piggyback on that. What are some of those key lessons that this has taught you or your teams or your business that you will carry through to the future, even if it returns to some level of normalcy, which it may or may not? What are some of those important lessons? And I'll ask you that next, Vinay, so I'll give you some time to prepare, but I'll start with you, Carlos.
Sure. So kind of the lessons learned, we had the assumption that technology is going to be well received by our employees. So we had at Caterpillar, and in my previous life, and only at Caterpillar, that we need to have face-to-face classes, that we need to have ILTs because that's what we used to do, and that's what we used to offer from the L&D organization. And we had that belief that people, they don't go to learn in the computer, in the phones. Now we are confirming that it's not true. And it's not a generational fact, right? It's a situational fact. I think as an organization, if we have the technology in place that can help them to go to the place that they need it when they need it, it's important, first of all. Second piece, we as humans, right, if we are interacting, let's say we have a dinner today, Will, and you're asking me about specifics about my country from Mexico, if I don't have the answer, what I do is I'm going to go and Google it. So what is our responsibility from the L&D standpoint to have that place, that Google space in our organization that people can go and find information when they need it? Historically, we used to have a lot of push. You have to learn it. You have to memorize that. not anymore. There's a lot of information out there in our heads that we don't need to memorize that. So what we need to have available that information with the right tools, with the right technology. And when I say the right technology, don't give me that I'm big investment, right? No, let's use what is available, right? We have the YouTube channel, we have Google, we have our SharePoint site. How we can interact, how we can make it interact, all these technology that we have in our organization in one place, and guiding our learners, our employees to go to the place that we want them to go. Because another thing that we learn is you are not going to leave everything and go there and find it by yourself. No, they need some guidance, right? If you have let's say we have Jammer, why we are using Jammer and what is the reason for Jammer, right? If we're going to be in Workday Learning, well, not everything is going to be in the Workday Learning, right? You will need to continue using your SharePoint site so that we can direct people to a specific place for the information that they needed. And finally, something that we are learning too is people have access to any cloud. Well, 95% of the population have access to any cloud, any website, any place, because we have these beautiful devices that are called iPhones or whatever your device are using it, but people have access to the cloud at any time, at any point. So we don't have to be scared to use the technology that is available for our employees and for ourselves.
Yeah, that's really great. And I love your comments on sort of guiding the experience. And Vinay, so to recap, what are some lessons learned you'll carry through this? And while you're answering that, just for the people watching and listening, I'm going to share a poll as well. So you can fill that out as we listen to Vinay, but it's really, I'm trying to get at, I don't know if actually I can share it or not. Maybe someone can share the poll. So, but I want to get some feedback from the audience around if you're more productive, there it is, working remote, or less productive working remote. So that'll be something we can comment in a moment, but kicking it back over to you, Vinay, what are some lessons learned now that we've moved remote, but some good things or some positive things you can take forward with you in the coming years?
Sure. So, I'm going to touch on two aspects. One, on the whole infrastructure piece. I mean, the lessons learned on the infra side, like Karla shared, is there's an acceleration in the use of technology. Most organizations did not realize that the acceleration would be so rapid and so forth, but I think it's great news for the future. So what's coming through this disruption is pushing us to be more agile, to be more tech savvy, and to move faster on digital platforms. So that's been a key aspect. But the other element that I want to highlight is that one key learning is that the shift to working virtually or working from home is not as simple as it looks. There's a huge change process that needs to be managed by the learning organizations, and it's very, very important that we are realizing that it's critical for leaders to have skills on being fair, being genuine, being caring, being authentic, and being there for people, and realizing that life is moving into a new normal. It's about realizing that people are, though working from a workspace at home, but it's not the same as their office space. So making sure that you make that connection with their real life and have an understanding of that is the other big learning that we have seen emerge over the last few months.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mind, Will, I'd like to build on what Vinay said.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So what we have been finding, we have cameras, right? And maybe at some point you will see my kids walking around or maybe yelling or shouting. Something that we have been finding at Caterpillar is very important. Is we are more humans right now versus the leaders or the person that you want to be in the office. Because now you can see my space, you can see my house, you can see how can I interact with my family. I remember before the pandemic, historically, it was not well received working from home. Right now, it's a fact that you need to work from home. Then I remember my days when I have a conference call, video call at home. I told my kids, please, I have a call from this to this, and if you need to go to somewhere else, go, please, because I don't want any interruption. Now it's part of my day-to-day, and I feel perfectly fine, right? If you have a dog, if you have a bird outside, I think it's part of the meeting. So what I'm trying to say here is we as a leader, we as an employees, now we are more humanized somehow versus the persona that you want to be in the office. So that's something that I really, it's so important that hopefully we don't lose that part when we go to the new normal, whatever is going to be the new normal.
It's a wonderful point. I've seen more cute dogs, beautiful children, interesting bookcases, things that you'll never get that opportunity meeting in the office, or you might not get that opportunity often. And in fact, I hosted a Best in Show event where everyone brought their dogs and we voted on who had the cutest outfit or knew the most tricks. And so that just would never happen. And there's actually an opportunity, I think, to lean into that and ask someone, hey, bring your favorite book, or bring something in your home that means something, or let me meet your kids in a way that wasn't possible. And that makes our business and learning more human. And I'm curious for either one of you that have a perspective on this, how do we take some of that humanness and carry that into our learning programs or into any of our projects that we're working on?
So
if you know, go ahead, Carlos.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll follow you. No, I'll follow you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. So what we're doing right now at Caterpillar, and that's something that I did in my previous life. So again, recognizing that we are human beings, and if we go to the emotional part, so we all of us have emotions, right? The primary emotions: fear, hurt, anger, sadness, joy. So the challenge is we develop content, whatever is the content related about it, is if we can connect those emotions, fear, hurt, anger, sadness, joy, with my work, right? People will recognize themselves with the content, and it will be easier to learn about what we want them to transmit or what we want them to learn. So it can sound kind of very romantic, the emotional piece, or connecting with the emotions, but it's so important that if we can define specifically what does that mean to me as an employee or as the audience, the content that you are providing is going to help us a lot. Because if we just put letters there, a PowerPoint, it doesn't mean nothing to me. It doesn't mean nothing for my work. It doesn't mean anything as a human being. It's going to be so difficult to develop the capabilities digitally. So I think for me, connecting with emotions and of course with your work, and most importantly, responding to the question of what the content means to me and my job, it's a key success factor.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. Those are great points. And, you know, the only piece that I would like to add is that we need to make sure that in everything we are doing, we put people at the center of everything we do. That's going to be key. I mean, in learning anyway, you know, we keep the learner at the center of, you know, how we devise our strategy, how we implement it. But more so, it's important that we start bringing some of these elements that we are learning into the value systems of the company in terms of bringing the right context, bringing the right examples, and then linking them to the programs that we do in our workspace, whether it's on leadership, whether it's on helping them pick up new skills to be successful in the virtual world. I think the element of keeping the human connection genuine, real, and authentic is absolutely key. And that needs to kind of continue to emerge as a new key objective of how we really build, you know, the future skills of our workforce. How do we future-proof? How do we do all the interventions to future-proof it?
Yeah, really wonderfully said. And I want to draw some attention here to the poll. Hopefully you can see that actually a majority of folks said they're feeling more productive in general now that they're in a remote working situation, which is interesting. I know as a change manager myself that if we'd probably done this poll on day 3 of working remote, that might look a lot less robust in terms of percentage. But as we've adapted, as we've figured out our ergonomics, as we have our room, and I actually share a calendar with my wife on who gets to use certain rooms at different times, that all takes mental energy. Now I think we're starting to find our groove a little bit, and we're starting to even become more productive. And what's interesting now is learning professionals, we're trying to figure out what does this mean in terms of the content we provide? What percentage of it now is self-service? How do we do meaningful activities? It used to be, we get up, have people moving around, networking events. How are we adapting to now take advantage of people are feeling more productive? How can they be more productive learners? So I'm curious, I'll start with you, Vinay, on this one. Have any of your learning programs been how have they been massively altered? Now it's a virtual audience to increase engagement. That's the hardest part. It's hard to keep people engaged because now their dog's barking, their significant others walked in. You can't stand up and move around. Are there things that you've tried or seen work in terms of engagement?
Yeah, so a couple of things. As you look across the industry, the biggest challenge of managing a workforce when they're working remote is that you have a new dimension. You have a completely global organization that's operating from every corner of the world. So in a element of delivery, you need to make sure that, of course, your technology is state of art. You're using all the web virtual platforms. You're using virtual tutoring. You are bringing in the breakouts within the virtual setups. That's key. But I think the other element of engagement that's really redefining is how do you continue to engage your workforce by using new digital tools, like using chatbots to make them stay engaged, having digital apps which can not only help them through their learning process, but also be conduits of seeking feedback, checking on learner confidence, ensuring that you have a pulse on the audience by having a mood meter. And those responses need to be looked at a real-time basis. So if you actually look at the learning organization of the future, it's going to morph into more of I would say, a war room setup, where you are looking at what learners are sharing with you, how they are feeling, and how they are reacting to the content that's being shared. How is the learning taking place? How's the internalization happening? And a lot of metrics that predominantly in the learning space were around, I would say, the Kirkpatrick level 1 to 5 are now morphing into understanding how people are adopting to digital technology and how can we measure engagement on an ongoing basis. So I think there's a radical shift in looking at tools and technologies to stay connected, which are supplementary to the web platforms that we have to empower learning. And at the same time, redefining how we look at learning technology, learning analytics, and define measures of success, which help us stay attuned and very close and very true to what's the new reality.
Hey, that really resonates with me. What's really surprised me, is how many tools existed that I wasn't using, like breakout rooms virtually. I wasn't using that as much. Some of the mood and the analytics that already existed. And then the flip side of that is I'm so excited over the next 6 months to a year, all of the new businesses and all of the new technologies that will be launched to aid us in this new world. So I'm just so excited about the innovation that's to come as a result of this. And I'll pass it over to you, Carlos. What are some things you've tried or you're seeing or even you're excited about in the future?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me tell you again from the personal space, my kids are Montessori kids. So we have been working together for the last 3 months at home. So I'm learning a lot about the way they do things. And of course, I'm trying to apply some of those things first with my team. At some point, hopefully we can do it in the company. But it's so important and reinforcing because maybe some of you guys in your company, you have this philosophy of learning by teaching, right? The new technology, if we have someone like me, like loves to speak, and I'm going to be talking for the next 2 hours, I'm going to lose my audience. But if in advance I tell them that I have some tasks that need to be accomplished before the class and during the class, so people will come prepared, right? Of course, there's going to be a pushback that I don't have the time to be prepared, but if you tell them that you will play a role in that presentation, in that session, I bet you they will be prepared, right? And kind of following this format, you don't need to prepare slides. What we want is really to understand the concept and help us to understand the way that you learn it, right? That's one piece. The other piece now with the new technology is the camera, right? I think in the past, we have also as a company, hey, don't use the camera, that's up to the employees, we don't have the policy. Now it's like, we have a camera, let's use it, right? Because it feels that you belong to somewhere. Because if I'm talking just to the screen and I don't see anyone there, it can also be very boring, right? First of all, and more the sense of belonging, because you need to see faces. You are not in the office anymore. So I want to see my friends. I want to see the people that I interact. So the camera is very important. The other piece is the other way that you are doing it here. So survey, right? Tell me, what do you think? What do you want to know? The chat. having someone next to you that can help you to manage the chat, because sometimes there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of things coming on that you as a presenter, you cannot handle it. So if you have someone that can help you to filter the most important things or the things that need to be addressed, that's important. And again, starting your sessions with indicators, as I say. So what are the indicators that you want to get? What are the outcomes for that session? What is the outcome for that specific training? And let's not be so think. Now we need to have kind of a field of knowledge, right? It's not such a big program. It's something, what do you want to get from that session? What is the outcome for that specific session? And if we accomplish or not the outcome.
That's great. You got me thinking about skills, and I'll just share personally for me. I'm being asked to upskill some new skills. And what I mean by that is, for example, something I'm being asked for recently is we need something on virtual presence. We need something for our leaders on how do you lead a virtual offsite? How do you share your vision? And what's your overall presence? What do you do with your hands? I mean, some of the simple presentation skills workshops, everything about them aren't applicable anymore because it's all about owning the stage is literally the name of one of them. And it's really, instead of saying owning the room, it's owning the Zoom. So what are some of the new skills that you're being asked to work on with your organizations, or some of the new challenges that you're working in terms of upskilling? So I'll go to you, Vinay. What are some of the new skills for you?
Well, the most critical is, how do you help people have agility in learning? And how can you make them adapt to a self-paced environment where predominantly, if you look at the outsourcing industry, to a large extent, it's been set up to train in a classroom setup. Though the BPO, KPO industry uses a lot of technology, it's a tech-intensive industry. The reality was that the learning function was still, I would say, using technologies which were pretty static, doing, the face-to-face classroom setup. So the new skills, as we are helping our workforce shift to the new normal, is making sure that we help them to be agile in how they learn, in making sure that we have the ability to keep them stay focused, and leverage the creativity that our millennial and centennial workforce anyway gets to the table, and give it a sense of purpose. So making sure we help them have a sense of purpose, help them drive focus, make them be very agile and be successful in how they use self-learning tools is emerging as a new normal for us. The other element is that on the face of it, like Carlos said, it may seem very simple that now we have all these digital platforms. We have Zoom, we have WebEx, we have a lot of these tools that can help us connect and stay engaged. Being engaged in a virtual environment is not easy. Human beings are essentially very social. And when you make that shift, it's not a shift of maybe doing learning or a training just for a short period of time. It's not maybe just a 1-hour session. Sometimes it's extended for weeks. So how do you help them make sure that they are actually engaged with the learning and the learning is relevant, is not just an element of how the content is, but how the learners learn. So having a pulse check from a learning function is key, which takes me to my last point on this, that it's not only looking at the skills that our learners need to have, it's actually redefining the skills that we need to have within our learning function. How do we make our trainers to be more successful facilitators? How do we make sure that we have the content that's conducive for people to stay engaged and for it to be relevant to them? And that shift on the whole user experience design is going to be much more driven and focused than it has ever been. So I think it's on two sides. One, on how the learners need to pick up new skills to learn and be successful in the jobs they do virtually. And at the same time, how the enablers, the learning leaders, the facilitators have those and display those skills to help them be successful.
Great call out. I love the point on we are going to have to up our game in terms of our instructional design and the way that the courses and the curriculum and the technologies we're using in order to keep people engaged. That's the other side of it. I think that's really well said. Carlos, I'm sure you have some points to add as well.
Sure. So at Caterpillar, well, as you know, in kind of 8 months in the organization, but what I know from my peers, there's a lot of work happening with our leadership team, right? Because the culture is going to change. I told you that we are a push company. We push a lot of content, right? Now we want to have this self-direct learning, right? We want to transfer that responsibility to the employees. Our job will be to provide the tools for the employees to do whatever they need to go to develop specific skills. But if we don't have a strong leadership team, a strong management that can have those conversations with their teams, like coaching, feedback. Feedback is a gift. That's what we have been talking the last few months, and it's one of the most important tools that we want to develop at Caterpillar. First of all, the managers to be co-responsible with the employees about their self-development, right? And they can drive that, and we as an L&D organization support the managers with tools that can help them to have that conversation with the employees. Providing the technology, right, so that they can get whatever they needed when they need it. That could be a course, that could be mentoring sessions, or whatever is going to be part of the tools of self-development. The other piece is we are developing managers for detecting and developing talent, right? Caterpillar is a very engineering organization, right? We have a specific business, and we have specific capabilities for a specific business. So developing talent across the organization is very important, and bringing the best talent to the company is another big goal for our organization. And finally, how we can enable technology, right? This situation, ironically, is helping us. Maybe we would use like 2 or 3 years of change management using technology, right? But it's how the managers, the leaders, and the employees and Caterpillar can enable technology that can make more efficient their job, right, and more productive for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point in terms of enabling technology. That is something we are all working really quickly to do right now. I know we are going to save some time for Q&A, so I'll make this my last question. And, you know, a lot of this conversation has been around speed and agility and in the face of disruption. And sure, this is an unprecedented level of disruption, but certainly not the last that we'll see of it. So I'm curious, as things are changing and shifting, how do you drive speed? What are things, tools, or tactics you use to help adapt to these disruptions as quickly as possible? And I'll go to you, Vinay, on that one.
Sure. So, I mean, you know, when you think of speed, it's basically coming out of 2 elements. One, what's your ability to anticipate what's needed? That's key. So I think one element that we have to start doing more effectively, and that's going to be a key differentiator, is our ability as a learning function to be able to anticipate disruptions. That's going to be paramount. And that can be done in a couple of ways. One, making sure we have very clearly established data architectures to understand what's working, what's not working. You know, there's a difference between having the pulse of a new hire class when you deal with a lot of new employees joining organization, and as you help them come up through their onboarding experience. But it's very different when you are trying to look at, you know, how to stay connected with a workforce that's being trained at home. So having that agility to know and respond quickly is one key element of speed. The other key dimension of that is making sure that we have the tools and the technology not only working, but we have the soft skills with our leadership within the learning function to make that successful. I'll give you an example. You know, we've always had a lot of focus on the importance of EQ and how it can help a leader be successful, how it can help a trainer to engage the class and manage the connectivity. But today, the new normal that's emerging is, you know, what a lot of people are calling the digital EQ. That's very, very different. That's making sure that you have that connectedness with your audience in the digital space with almost limited or no physical interaction. So making sure that you fast pace the ability of your teams to have that context and that readiness is the other element of how you bring speed and agility in there. And the last but not the least, making sure your frontline leaders, the leaders who manage teams across the organization, have the necessary skills and the confidence to do their job effectively. Because no longer coaching is the same. You cannot walk to someone's desk, pat them on the back, and say it's a good job. So making sure that you are focused on those elements, and that's kind of part of how the learning culture of the organization is expanding is key. Having the necessary skills at the leadership level, making sure you have the ability to understand and know when change is coming, almost on a proactive basis, is what really defines speed. And that's just my view, but I would love to hear what Carlos has to say.
Sure. So thank you, Vinay. I have a couple of points here. The first one is, with the actual situation when we talk about speed, we need to recognize first that people is working from home, that some of us have kids, or we have some duties that were managed historically by someone else. In my case, my kids, they used to have baseball classes, dancing classes, so the afternoon was quite busy, right? And they were at school, by the way. So now we need to recognize, in my team, I know I have moms, I have dads, so the speed sometimes is not exactly what I'm expecting from them right now. But if I tell them specifically what I need from you and when, and tell me if it's possible or not, I think those are the three questions that we need to do, right? And if it's not possible, when can be done, so that we can create the real expectations to our stakeholders and also internally as a team. That's a fact that is happening right now. From the orientation standpoint, of course, we need to define what means speed, right? But in our case right now, speed, and it's going to be a cultural changes, will require also to be more flexible in making mistakes, because speed can bring mistakes, and we as an organization have to be okay making those mistakes, right? And when we make mistakes, of course, we have to prepare our employees to tell them you need to have a plan B and plan C, right? But also we learn by making mistakes versus everything perfect, right? So that's something that we know that we want to go past. We need to have different kind of capabilities, but also we need to recognize the risks of the speed that we want to implement in the organization.
I really appreciate the connection you made about speed and mistake forgiveness, or being comfortable with that being a reality, particularly now more than ever. And both of you, really, I've taken away your approach is just so human. Just talking about prioritizing not just learner first, but human first, and talking about how, it's become normal that your kids are walking in, Carlos. I think that's just a wonderful way to embrace this new reality. And part of that is just step one of thriving through disruption, is that acceptance and a human side of it. So I'll tell you this, I know we're out of time. We're about to open it up to some Q&A. And I just want to pause and say, Vinay, Carlos, thank you for letting me ask you a couple questions and sharing all of your insights. Also, don't forget, I actually have my AirPods with me right now. These are my favorite thing in the world. And so if you take a selfie and you post it to LinkedIn, correct me if I'm wrong, you'll be entered to receive some of those. So if you want to take a second and take a selfie, who knows? I love my AirPods so much. I would take another pair. So I'm gonna my wife steals mine all the time. So I'm gonna take a selfie too. So take a moment and do that. And then I think we're gonna move to a Q&A. So if that's next, feel free.
All right. So thank you, Will. Thank you, the panelists. It's been an amazing session. And we do have a few questions. I think we won't have time for all of them, but I wanted to get to the first one, which is there any training that you had to put a pause on that you felt was impossible to implement at home? That's from Patricia.
Well, Patricia, at Caterpillar, we went back and forward. We were going to have these training for future general managers, not only with Caterpillar employees, but with a bunch of companies that is similar to our industry. So big companies could be like the GE, the Boeing. So we went back and forward. We thought to cancel because it was going to happen in different sites, and it was very complex, the delivery of this training. So it was a lot of back and forward, talking with different CEOs, chief learning officers. So at some point, the easy and simple answer, let's cancel it, reschedule it. And it was this beautiful energy to say, no, we need to embrace technology, right? And we were able, it was not a 5-day training program as we planned it, but we were able to put together, not me, my peers team, a program of 2.5 days of training with a specific agenda, with a specific presenters, with a specific outcomes. And it went so well. And it's funny because also we were having some issues with Zoom. We had Zoom in the past, but we know all the problems that Zoom went through. So we need to use Teams. So 2 days before, we need to adapt the training into the team. So the team did a phenomenal job. First of all, moving from 5 days training face-to-face to 2 days training program, of course, virtual, and also in 2 days changing and adapting the course based on the technology where we're using it. So, yeah, if you ask me, my recommendation is go and do the training virtually, and if you fail, that's fine. You will have a lesson learned then. You won't repeat that again. But if we don't try, we will never learn.
Anyone else would like to add to that?
I can actually jump in. So I don't think we have, stopped doing any training, but, the way the training is being delivered has completely changed. So I would say the trainings we used to do previously are no longer the same. What's also changing is that the way we would drive interactivity or engagement or internalization of learning has started to take a complete shift. So the way the modality and some of the intrinsic elements which define how you achieve the outcomes are changing. I would say in that sense, though we haven't deprioritized any learning, but the trainings or the programs that were done before are now being adapted in a very new normal in the whole digital virtual environment.
I'll add too. For us, I'll be honest, it depends on the price tag. So we were looking at some very robust external training for our VP population around strategy enablement and some really big change management work and these big offsites for executives, right? And so some of that just doesn't seem as cost conscious as we're looking at the economy and how we're trying to protect jobs. And so some of that has been, I would say, paused or dialed back, and a few things just outright canceled. And there's also with some projects thinking about, should we reshape some of our values and culture? Probably not right now, right? Because people's appetite for change is just, the threshold is low. And so most of our work, Vinay, to your point, has been just changing the format or looking at cost and saying that doesn't feel like the right investment just as a company optically and where we should be putting our money. And that's been a big indicator for us.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Will, Carlos, and Vinay. It's been a fantastic panel. And thank you as well to our audience who kept the questions coming. There were a lot of really great questions. And if we didn't get to your question, I'm sure that our speakers will be more than happy to connect on LinkedIn after the event.